I never knew a simple car repair could lead to an unbelievable new beginning. I will never forget the day everything fell apart. The afternoon sun poured through the grimy garage window, casting shadows over tools and spare parts like whispers of a forgotten past. My heart raced as I tightened the last bolt, barely noticing the faint sound of glass shattering outside. Just a routine fix, I told myself. What could go wrong? And then, the explosion of noisy, a crashing siren, a scream, the air thick with smoke. My hands trembled as I stumbled out, my mind flooded with confusion. I found her there, lying helpless on the asphalt. A stranger, yet somehow familiar. Dark curls splayed around her head like a halo, the glazed look in her eyes haunting. I could feel panic tightening my chest, a lump forming in my throat. Help. Someone. Call 911. I shouted, but my voice felt small, lost in the chaos. I knelt beside her, shaking, feeling her warmth slip away. I could hear the muffled clamor of passers-by. Their gazes were pinning me down, judging, whispering about the girl and stranger stuck in this moment. Did they see the guilt etched on my face? Did they recognize the fear coursing through my veins? In that instant, though, the world fell silent. It was only us, her heartbeat weak under my trembling fingers. My gaze locked onto hers, and I saw something flicker, a glimmer in the abyss of despair. It was a spark of hope, but it was fading, and I didn't know how to save her. All around us, the noise blurred into a symphony of dread. Stay with me. I cried, but the words felt useless, like tearing a page out of a ghost story that refused to end. Moments dragged on, stretching like eternity. Each second felt like a dagger through my heart. Then, something unexpected happened. A figure emerged from the crowd, an old mechanic with a grease-stained cap. He didn't radiate authority but carried a weight, a mystery. I can help. He shouted, rushing to my side. Everything shifted. I took a shaky breath, watching him work, his hands moving with a purpose I didn't comprehend. Suddenly, the eerie silence shattered like glass. The girl's eyes widened, and she gasped. What's happening? I whispered, heart racing. The mechanic glanced at me, then back at her. You don't understand, he said, words dripping with meaning. But before he could explain, a blaring siren filled the air, pulling our focus. Everything around me swirled into chaos. The world collapsed again, and I was left grasping for answers. Why her? What had I stumbled into? Hey, before we continue with this amazing story, I need to give you an important heads up. Many subscribers have reported that YouTube unsubscribed them without warning. Take a quick second to check the red button below to make sure you're still subscribed to the channel. I'd hate for you to miss any of the exclusive content coming soon. And while you're there, smash that like button, it really helps me out with the algorithm. Oh, and tell me in the comments, which city are you watching from? I love getting to know every amazing person who's part of this community. Your participation makes all the difference. Let's connect. I was alone in a crowded world, but even with the old mechanic beside me, a crushing weight of uncertainty settled deep within my chest. The distant wail of sirens signaled the approach of help, yet all I could focus on was the fleeting breath of the girl beneath my touch. Stay with me. I repeated, each word a prayer. But the light in her eyes flickered dangerously close to being extinguished. The mechanic, his calloused hands steady and purposeful, used the few tools at his disposal with deftness I could only admire. For every second that passed, my heart raced faster. That I can't lose her, I murmured more to myself than anyone around. The crowd, now somewhat hushed, had become a blur. Faces contorted with concern, fear, and even judgment. I could sense their questioning gazes, dredging up the remnants of guilt I had labored to bury deep within. Then I noticed the mechanic stealing glances between us, as if deliberating over an unsaid consequence. You hold her, he commanded, but the way he said it felt more like a plea. I nodded, my hands trembling, my fingers finding the rhythm of her pulse, fragile yet alive, a damning reminder of how fleeting life could be. She deserves to fight, he said, more to himself than to me, before turning his attention back to his bag of tools. I seized the moment to speak to her, desperate to forge a connection amidst the chaos. "Can you hear me?" I asked, whispering through tears that blurred my vision. "You're going to be okay." I felt my voice cracking, the truth battling with the lie. There was no way of knowing if those words held any weight. The sirens grew louder, the air vibrated with the arrival of an ambulance. A crew of paramedics rushed toward us, faces masked with urgency. Relief washed over me momentarily, but it was short-lived as I felt a tingle of panic. Would they take her away from me? Would I be left alone with my spiraling thoughts? As they worked swiftly, the mechanic glanced at me, his eyes kind yet melancholic. "This girl, she's special," he murmured, causing something in my chest to clench. What did he know? Who was she, really? Before I could pose the questions pooling in my mind, he placed a hand on my arm. "Trust me," he said. "There are forces in this world far beyond our understanding, and they've chosen her for something. It is crucial you don't lose hope." His words sank deep, a strange mixture of comfort and confusion swirling within me. I wanted to understand what he meant, but the sound of the paramedics pulled me back to the moment. They examined her, their expert touches calm and efficient. And yet my anxious heart beat only for a heartbeat that began to slow. "Please, please," I whispered, leaning closer, "stay with us. This isn't the end for you." A moment of silence enveloped us as we watched the medics struggle for a reaction. Then, a sudden gasp escaped her lips, a spark returned to her eyes, but it was accompanied by a flicker of recognition. She looked directly at me, a glimmer of something profound passing between us. "I know you," she murmured, her voice barely above a whisper. Waves of shock crashed over me, a flood of confusion. "What do you mean?" I implored, my grip tightening as her gaze drifted for a moment. Before she could elaborate, her eyelids fluttered closed, and I felt an overwhelming sense of helplessness engulf me. A million thoughts collided. How much had I missed? What connection could I possibly have with a girl I barely knew? And then, just as despair began to settle in the pit of my stomach, a thunderous crash sounded in the distance, breaking the fragile tension. The crowd spun in shock, and an unrelenting urgency surged within me. Something was clearly amiss, but when I turned back to the girl, she was slipping away again, the paramedics scrambling to bring her back, and with that, a single thought loomed larger than all else: what exactly had I stumbled into beyond a mere accident? With that question spiraling through my mind, the foreboding shadow of uncertainty loomed larger. As I watched her fight for her life, it dawned on me whether she made it or not, nothing would ever be the same again. A life that had been mundane and routine was now irrevocably intertwined with something larger, something inexplicable. Just as the crew secured her to the stretcher and wheeled her toward the ambulance, fresh chaos erupted from the edge of the street. A figure broke through the gathered crowd, charging toward us with an urgency that shifted the atmosphere. "Stop!" the figure yelled, but it was too late. The ambulance doors swung shut, and I was left standing amidst the fragments of what should have been just another day, struggling to comprehend the impact of all that had transpired, what awaited us beyond this moment. The engine of the ambulance roared to life, drowning out the sudden echoes of panic that reverberated through the crowd. My heart raced as the sirens sliced through the air, a haunting melody of urgency and despair. I felt like a mere spectator to a tragic play, utterly unprepared for the role of the next act. The figure that had emerged from the throng looked wild, his hair tousled and eyes frantic, but I couldn't focus on anything but the retreating vehicle, my heart racing faster than the wheels could turn. "Where did she go?" he shouted, his voice a mix of anger and desperation. I didn't recognize him, yet something about the anguish painted across his features ignited an urgency within me. "Who are you?" I managed to ask, bewildered and breathless. But his only response was to push past me, muscles taut as he moved with purpose. My gaze followed him, a man desperate to save someone who was already slipping away, just as I was. I felt a surge of solidarity, a connection born from our shared urgency. "They just took her," I shouted back, needing him to understand the depth of my own helplessness. The panic crackled in the space between us, and his eyes met mine, filled with a mix of frustration and fear. "Not if I have anything to say about it," he snapped, hastily running toward his own vehicle, parked haphazardly along the curb. With a pit forming in my stomach, I realized he wasn't done fighting. A part of me fell into his fervor, as if somehow, if he dared to chase after hope, so could I. Wait. "Why are you going after the ambulance?" I called, chasing after him as he leaped into the driver's seat. He didn't answer, instead throwing the door shut with a tumultuous crash. The engine roared, and before I could catch my breath, he sped off into the distance, tires screeching against the asphalt. The crowd slowly dispersed, whispers of disbelief circulating around us. I stood in the aftermath, alone but not quite. The mechanic's eyes followed the speeding vehicle with a knowing sadness, a touch of wisdom etched into the lines of his face. "She has a connection to him," he said softly, almost as if to himself. "The girl, she's not just anyone." My heart fluttered at his words. I needed to know what he meant, but how did one even begin to ask such a question when everything felt so impossible? "What do you know about her?" My voice was small, an attempt to reach out while the enormity of my emotions raged inside. He hesitated, glancing back toward the path the ambulance had taken. "More than I wish to. Trust me, you're caught in the center of something profound. Stop talking in riddles." I fired back, frustration bubbling over. "If you know anything, share it." But he shook his head slowly. "It's not my place, dear girl. It is her journey, and you may find your own path intertwining with it." That cryptic statement sent chills creeping down my spine. What did it mean? I couldn't grasp the idea of my own life being woven together with hers when she was fighting for breath miles away. Somewhere, a truth lingered, shading the air with uncertainty. Desperate for some semblance of control, I turned my back on the mechanic, my feet leading me away from the lingering crowd. I simply had to follow the burning impulse within me, and uncertainty morphed into a determination fueled by instinct. I would find her. The world outside shifted, the colors dimmer and less vibrant as I wandered aimlessly. My thoughts spiraled snippets of her laughter, the way her eyes sparkled with life. My mind skipped back to that brief moment when she had recognized me. How could that be? Nothing made sense. As shadows began to stretch across the dimming sky, I felt a tug in my heart, a flicker of a memory faintly echoing in my mind. Faces blended together, moments lost in time, but a single phrase cut through the chaos: "You have to remember." Just as I brushed aside the creeping sensations, my phone buzzed in my pocket, a loud cacophony against my troubled thoughts. Pulling it out, I saw a message flashing on the screen, but the sender's name was one I neither recognized nor expected. "You are needed. Find her. There are things you both must know." Bile rose in my throat, a sudden flood of dread washing over me. I glanced wildly around, as if the answer would materialize out of thin air, but nothing came, only the unsettling grip of uncertainty. With the growing need for answers clawing at me, I couldn't shake the unsettling feeling that I was now entwined in a web larger than myself, a path leading toward the unknown, and with that thought, I took the first step down that path, but one question hung palpably in the air: what truth was waiting for me on the other side? The soft rain began to fall, each droplet a faint reminder of life's ongoing rhythm amid the chaos swirling in my mind. I walked down the street, allowing the cool air to wash over me, as if it could cleanse my thoughts and fears. The world blurred around me, washed in muted colors under the dim, flickering streetlights. Every step felt heavy, laden with the weight of uncertainty and the desperate need to attach meaning to my sense of helplessness. At the corner cafe, familiar yet distant, the comforting scent of coffee teased me, pulling me back to simpler times. I pushed the door open, the bell ringing softly above my head, an echo of the solace I craved. I needed a moment to gather my thoughts, to breathe, to find clarity in the midst of overwhelming confusion. But as I took a seat in the back, my phone buzzed again, vibrating insistently against the table. The same unknown sender's name flashed ominously on the screen: "Trust your instinct. Seek the truth, instinct." I had barely grasped the idea of my own emotions, let alone my instincts. My heart raced again. Were they trying to guide me or further entangle me in this spiraling mystery? "Hey, you okay?" A friendly voice broke through my spiraling thoughts. I looked up to see a young barista, his name tag reading Sam with a warm smile that reached his eyes. He wiped his hands on a towel, the evident concern etched in his brow showing a kindness I hadn't realized I needed. "Just a lot on my mind," I replied, forcing a weak smile in return. He nodded, leaning against the counter. "Want to talk about it? Sometimes it helps to share the burden." I hesitated, wiping invisible dust from the table. In that moment, I felt a flicker of hope in the kindness of a stranger. Perhaps speaking about it could lessen the heaviness. "It's just a friend is in trouble and I'm trying to figure out how to help," I admitted, my voice trembling slightly. His eyes softened. "I wish I could help more. If you need anything, advice, company, even resources, just let me know. You never know what you might find when you start looking." His simple offer of support felt like a lighthouse in a storm, yet it only amplified the tumultuous emotions swirling inside me. The comforting notion of a connection alongside the chaos I felt made me want to cry. Instead, I nodded, appreciating his kind words with a trace of gratitude. Just as I started to sip my lukewarm coffee, a clash of voices interrupted the ambience of the cafe. A couple sat nearby, low voices rising in tension. They argued over something mundane, a forgotten anniversary or a misplaced item. I listened, half aware, contemplating my own anguish when suddenly, the woman's next words shot through the atmosphere like an arrow piercing the heart of the mundane. "Maybe love isn't enough this time. You can't hold on to someone who's already slipping away." The phrase struck me hard, reverberating unnervingly against the backdrop of my own turmoil. It was as if the universe was aligning my scattered emotions into something tangible, something I could not ignore. My thoughts drifted back to the man who chased after the ambulance, the urgency he displayed. Was love not enough? I couldn't let that be the case, not now, not when I felt so connected to a stranger in my heart. I had to figure this out, to help where I could, and focus on what really mattered. In a burst of determination, I slipped from the cafe and hurried into the street, where the rain began to fall harder. Each droplet felt as if it was washing away my hesitation, the tension embroiled in my chest bubbling to the surface. As I reached for my phone to call a friend for help, a sudden movement caught my eye. A figure stood across the street, hidden under a hood, their posture tense. I paused, staring, as a snippet of the familiar brushed against my memory, igniting a flicker of recognition. Before I could comprehend the sudden spark of memory, they turned and disappeared down an alley, vanishing into the obscurity. My heart raced as I instinctively followed, uncertainty battling with my instinct to chase this stranger who seemed connected to the tangled web of my life. The alley was dark and cramped, filled with shadows that danced unsettlingly under the flickering streetlight at the other end. I could hardly see, but every fiber of my being urged me forward toward what felt like an unavoidable revelation. And just as my heart pounded at the prospect of what I might find, a deep voice echoed from the shadows. "You've been looking for answers, haven't you?" Frozen, my breath hitched in my throat. The figure emerged partially from the shadows, and as he did, my heart plummeted into an abyss of disbelief. This was the man who had chased the ambulance. My heart stuttered in my chest as I stared at him, the dim light flickering against his features, a mixture of determination and vulnerability. The man had a haunted look in his eyes that mirrored my own turmoil, as if he too carried a burden too heavy to bear in silence. I would have taken a step back, retreating from the foreboding tension in the alley, but a magnetic pull kept me anchored to the spot. "Who are you?" My voice caught in my throat, trying to mask the trembling uncertainty that he paused, searching my face as if assessing how much I truly understood. "You need to know something. About your friend and about why those messages keep coming." His words were laced with gravity, each syllable sending shivers down my spine. "Why me?" I croaked, the question barely escaping my lips, desperation coating my disbelief. "What do you have to do with any of this? Because the truth doesn't lie in the shadows anymore." You've seen things that he hesitated, choosing his words with caution. Things that might endanger you if you don't act soon. My heart raced, the adrenaline almost dizzying. The rain splattered harder against the pavement, each drop sounding like a tick of a clock counting down towards some inevitable confrontation. What are you talking about? You've been given a gift, he said, stepping closer. Your connection to your friend is deeper than you realize, but it is also a path fraught with danger. He glanced around, his demeanor shifting as the shadows seemed to grow thicker. We're not safe here, I insisted, but my voice lacked the conviction I wanted. What does this have to do with the messages I've been receiving? The urgency in his gaze intensified. The sender knows you're getting closer, and your friend's life is at stake. You must trust your instincts and follow your heart, but realize that every choice bears a consequence. The flash of doubt crept back in, and I shook my head, trying to grasp the enormity of his words. What are you talking about? My voice grew softer, uncertainty wrapping around me like a cocoon. I don't even know where to begin. He took a step closer, the shadows wrapping tighter around him, almost enveloping me in their darkness. I was in the same place you are now, lost and hopeless. It led to irrevocable consequences I can't undo. A silence hung between us, heavy with unsaid fears and unacknowledged truths. There was a familiarity in his pain, an understanding that I had yet to confront. I saw now that he had weathered storms of his own, and somehow, beneath the impending aura of dread, a flicker of hope ignited. What did you lose? I dared to ask, my voice a fragile whisper, the rain now a mere background symphony to a larger heartbeat, the one that thrummed between us. A son, he revealed painfully, the weight of the words visibly falling upon him. I couldn't save him because I couldn't see past my own fears. I ignored the signs. My stomach twisted uncomfortably at his confession, his sorrow echoing through the shadows of my heart. I'm so sorry, I murmured, the empathy overwhelming me. But what does that have to do with me? I can help you find the truth before it's too late. But it's going to require trust. Trust in yourself, and trust in what's happening. In that moment, I felt an inexplicable sense of kinship with this man, two strangers brought together by fate's cruel hand. If he had lost everything, then I couldn't let the darkness consume me as well. I'll do whatever it takes, I affirmed quietly, fear tightened resolve blooming within me. But I need to know what you know. Just then, a cacophony of sirens pierced the night, drawing near and creeping like a chill through the alley. The man's eyes widened as he instinctively turned his head toward the noise. We don't have much time. They're coming for you too. The urgency palpable in the air ignited confusion and panic in my chest. What? Who's coming for me? But instead of answering, he took my hand, his grip firm and reassuring. Run. Now. Before I knew it, the shadows formed around a palpable entity, cocooning me in a burst of adrenaline. We dashed down the alley, the sound of sirens chasing us like dark specters demanding answers. My heart raced, blurring the line between instinct and fear. Just as I turned a corner, the press of his hand felt like a lifeline amid the encroaching chaos, but then the world shifted around us, the rush of footsteps behind me merged with the frantic rhythm of my heart. Suddenly, I turned, determined to face whatever lay in the depths of unknown terror. My breath caught as a golden flash emerged from the shadows, bright against the night, confirming my worst fears. A figure stepped into view, hands raised, a badge gleaming against the crackling strobe of light illuminating the alley's end. I froze, my heart pounding as the familiarity of the man standing before me illuminated a darkened truth I never anticipated. It was the police officer from the ambulance scene. Our eyes locked, and in that instant, everything spun out of control. Strangers became interwoven in a web of connections I had yet to fully comprehend. Stop right there. We need to know what you both are hiding. He shouted, his voice piercing through the rain, and in that moment, all hope felt like it was slipping away. The rain continued to pour, forming small rivers that snaked down the sides of the alley. I felt the world around me narrow as the officer advanced closer, his brow furrowed and eyes ablaze with determination, as if he alone held the key to my desperate confusion. My grip on the man beside me tightened instinctively. We're not hiding anything. I shouted, desperation squeezing my voice into a thin thread. "I just need to find my friend." The officer's gaze shifted to the man beside me, doubt etching deeper lines into his face. "Then you need to tell me who he is and why you're running." His command rang through the heavy air, and just like that, I felt the weight of uncertainty collapse upon my shoulders. The truth felt like an unwieldy beast that had somehow escaped from its cage, gnashing at my resolve. What if we only have one chance to explain? The haunted man beside me whispered urgently, leaning closer, as if to shield our shared truth from the world. "Tell me, or I'll have to take you both in." The officer barked, his voice gaining urgency, drenched in the rain-soaked intensity of the moment. "His son is in danger, my friend is in danger." I blurted out, fear warring with hope inside me. "They've been sending messages, hidden threats." The officer's expression changed at the mention of danger, his tough exterior faltering for just a heartbeat, a flicker of understanding flashing across his face. "Talk to me then," he urged, stepping closer, his eyes assessing me with a hunger for the truth buried beneath the chaos that I and that fragile heartbeat of vulnerability. Something within me shifted. "His name is Caleb, and he's been missing. I can feel that something's wrong, that the messages I've received are leading me to him." A deep exhale escaped the officer, his demeanor softening as recognition flickered in his eyes. "We've had reports some places of interest near your friend's last known whereabouts." He held my gaze, searching for something he desperately wanted to believe. "But I need you to help me connect the dots." The man beside me nodded slowly, an unspoken agreement solidifying between us. "If you know where he is, we'll help you find him," he insisted, his voice steady even as the shadows loomed larger around us, but the weight of fear still nestled in the officer's eyes, as he glanced back at a blur of red and blue flashing lights, echoing the chaos of our surroundings. How could I make him trust a fear-stricken girl and a man bearing the scars of loss when the very air screamed of urgency? Just then, a woman's voice floated down the alley, cutting through the tension like a breeze. "Officer! Over here!" My heart dropped as I turned to see another police officer approaching, urgency painted across her features. "We've got reports of suspicious activity at a nearby warehouse. The other units are mobilizing." Time slipped through my fingers like sand, and instinct propelled me forward. "Please, listen. Do you have any leads on Caleb?" The breath of hope echoed in my words, rising like a fragile flame against the weight of despair. The officer glanced at me, deliberating, his resolve softening. "We can still get you to safety, but you need to promise you won't run. If they're after you, every second counts." The man beside me shook his head, his brow creased with concern. "We're not running. We're following the threads we have left," he said fiercely, the conviction in his voice igniting a sense of purpose within me. But before I could respond, the woman officer stepped closer, cutting through the heaviness that wrapped us all like an uninvited cloak of darkness. "Let's get you to safety first, then we'll pull everything together." Her eyes darted between us, assessing who needed protecting the most in this surreal moment. "Wait," I said, realizing there was something inside Meth's small kernel of hope that had been growing, threatening to burst free from the bounds of my fear. "If Caleb is in danger, we have to go after him. Now." The officer's gaze sharpened, weighing my determination against the risks. "We need a game plan," he said firmly, but there was a flicker of agreement reflected in his eyes. "If we're going to do this, then we do it my way." In that moment, the shadows receded slightly, the impending dread still pulsing, but for the first time, the threads of hope began to weave together in the fabric of our alliance. As we prepared to move, turning toward a distant glimmer of light that hinted at a possible exit from the labyrinth of our fears, an unexpected sound echoed in the distancia cacophony, unlike the sirens that had chased us moments before. The deep rumble of an engine, growing louder, was unmistakable. A black SUV pulled onto the alley, its headlights cutting through the murky darkness. Panic surged through me, and before I could process the implications, figures began to spill out from the SUV, their faces obscured in the blur of shadows and the flickering light above. "Get down!" the officer shouted, instinctively shoving me behind him. And just like that, my world tilted once more. The men in dark clothing moved with a purpose that spoke of fear and danger, and I realized we're out of time. Everything hinged on this moment as the storm of chaos threatened to swallow us whole. The alley felt constricting as if the walls themselves were closing in, shaking with the vibrations of the SUV's engine and the sound of my racing heart pounding against my ribs. My instincts screamed at me to run, to escape the encroaching shadows, but the officer stood firm, blocking the line of sight between me and the threat. "Stay low," he directed, voice steady despite the chaos unfolding around us. Adrenaline coursed through me, and I tried to calm my breath, focusing on the moment, on keeping my body hidden behind the officer's sturdy frame. The men from the SUV moved with an eerie fluidity, their eyes scanning the alley as if searching for prey. I could see the sharp outlines of guns tucked beneath their jackets, and dread settled deep in my stomach. There was no denying if these were not ordinary operators. They exuded an air of danger that sent chills down my spine. That I felt the man beside me tremble. Perhaps he was experiencing the same struggle of fear and determination I was. "What do we do?" he murmured, his voice barely keeping itself together. "Listen to me," the officer replied, still vigilant, as the shadows around us began to drift closer. "Whatever happens next, keep your heads down. Well, wait for the right moment." Silence gripped the alley as the men spread out, falling into an unsettling formation like wolves circling their prey. A flash of recognition crossed the face of one man, and my breath caught in my throat. The facete belonged to someone I had hoped never to see again, a figure from the past whose shadow lingered long and dark over my life. "Jonah," I whispered, unable to stifle the tremor that slipped unintentionally from my lips. Memories of fear and loss flooded my mind, and for a split second, I was paralyzed. The officer glanced back at me, confusion mingling with concern. "Do you know him?" he asked, his voice dangerously low. "This man, he was part of the crew that threatened Caleb," I stammered, feeling shame wash over me. "He's connected to everything." "Stay quiet," the officer hissed, and I saw a mix of determination and anger flaring in his eyes. "We won't let them take you or your friend." Suddenly, one of the men shouted, "Find them. They've got nowhere to run." The urgency in his voice sent a shiver spiraling through the air, and I realized this wasn't just about finding us, it was about something far more sinister. As they advanced further into the alley, I saw a flicker of movement near the far end. A flicker of hope ignited within me, an old fire refusing to be snuffed out. It was a flicker of a person, shadowy but unmistakably familiar. My heart leaped. "Caleb!" I blurted, instinctively breaking the fragile spell of silence. No. The officer hissed, but it was too late. My cry echoed, bouncing off the brick walls with a paralyzing urgency. The men turned in unison, their predatory instincts homing in on the source of my voice. "Get behind me!" The officer shouted again, body tensing as he prepared to shield us. In that moment, bravery coursed through his veins like a lifeline. "Shoo, just stay quiet." I heard the man beside me mutter, pulling me further into the shadow of the officer's back. But it was too late, not just for my words but for the fragile hope flickering chaotically in my chest. The figures were on the move now, fierce and resolute, the powerful click of their boots against the wet pavement drowning any remaining thoughts of escape. "Spread out," Jonah commanded, voice cold and authoritative, sending chills racing down my spine. It was clear that they were determined. No hiding, no retreat. Then something unexpectedly jostled my view, a bright flash of light under the alley's distant exit, one of those glimmers that whispered of salvation, the very light I hoped to reach but couldn't fathom since we were trapped in the dark. Chaos erupted as the officer lunged forward, confronting Jonah and his cohorts with a strength that seemed almost unwavering. I was frozen to the spot, the world around me blurring into a cacophony of shouts and scuffles. Somehow, despite the terror, I felt the slightest spark of belief blooming within me. "Caleb! Where are you?" I shouted again, desperate, feeling impractically hopeful. Then out of the shadows, Caleb emerged like a ghost come back from the dead, his eyes wild and searching. "I'm here," he called back, but before he could take another step, a shadow darted in his direction. "Caleb!" I screamed, my voice tearing through the fear. And just as the air seemed to thicken with impending doom, a hand firm and strong gripped my arm, roughly pulling me back into the darkness. My heart sank, thrust from light into the crushing night as my world shattered with the reality of what was unfolding. Stay down. The officer roared again, forming a human barrier to shield the chaos around us, but everything blurred. I could hear Caleb's voice, raw and determined, warming the depths of my despair, even as my body was wrested back into shadows. I won't leave you. And in that haunting moment, as the storm of humanity around us reached a deafening climax, the sound of the gunshot rang out, echoing through the narrowing alleyway, sealing our fate in a single heart-stopping second. Fear wrapped its fingers around my throat, leaving no room for breath. All at once, the world shifted violently beneath my feet, hope teetered on the edge of despair, and the cold grip of reality surged in, threatening to pull me under. And as the dust began to settle around us, I realized in sheer horror that our fight was only just beginning. The silence that followed the gunshot felt like an eternity, a suffocating pause hung thick in the air, bordered only by the heavy thudding of my heart. My eyes darted frantically, searching for Caleb in the chaos that had erupted, but all I could see were shadows dancing and the frantic movements of men who loomed larger than life and more menacing than nightmares. Caleb! I screamed again, hoping against hope that he would answer. My voice, torn and desperate, echoed back to me without a reply, swallowed whole by the darkness. Stay low, stay low. The officer hissed, his body twisting in a protective arch, a steadfast wall against the onslaught. I could feel my companion beside me trembling, a shared pulse throbbing in the confines of our fear. But my mind was lost in a torrent of memories. The last time I had seen Caleb smile, the way he could light up any room with the smallest gesture, now replaced by an echo of dread and uncertainty. What if I never saw his smile again? The men were shouting now, a blast of commands and noise that shattered the fragile calm we had clung to. Jonah's sharp laugh pierced the air, a sound so cold it sent an icy shiver down my spine. You think you can hide, don't you? He taunted, his voice dripping with a familiar menace. You have no idea what you're in for. Out of the corner of my eye, I caught a swift movement. It was fleeting but undeniable. A flash of Caleb's familiar leather jacket, a heartbeat close and yet so impossibly far away. My heart surged with an instinct as primal as survival itself. I had to get to him. Go! My mind cried, pulling against the chains of fear wrapping around me. Without thinking, I lurched forward, pushing past the officer's protective stance, driven by a force deeper than fear. The alley felt alive, the walls pulsating as I sprinted toward the flickering silhouette of my hope. Stop! The officer's voice thundered behind me, but the world had narrowed into a singular focus. Caleb. I could see him now, his brows drawn tight, determination mixed with confusion, as he raised an arm almost like a beacon. That's when the echoes of footsteps rushed toward me, and Jonah's smirk twisted into a snarl. I could hear the gun being prepped behind me, the heavy click, a countdown of impending doom. Back off, or I swear. Caleb's voice surged through the noise, raw and filled with a courage that lit my soul on fire. The desperation in his tone only fueled my resolve. As I sprinted forward, a flash of kindness emerged in the chaos. A stranger, someone I didn't recognize, stepped into my path, their eyes fierce but focused. Take her! He yelled at me, his own body angled against the rising danger. Get her to safety. The moment hung suspended, a heartbeat of mutual recognition. This was a shared struggle, a fleeting alliance in a world gone mad. Gratefulness swelled within me, even as fear threatened to suck me under again. But like a magnet, my focus fixated only on Caleb, and as I reached him, I could see the struggle in his eyes, a desperate battle against the chaos closing in around us. Before I could even grab his hand, Jonah lunged forward, viciously shoving the stranger aside, then turning his gaze onto Caleb with a menacing grin. Thought you could run? You're not going anywhere. Hope splintered beneath that icy gaze, but Caleb's resolve wouldn't break. You don't scare me, he shot back, but his voice held an edge of uncertainty, and that was all it took. Before he realized what was happening, Jonah closed the gap, moving like a striking snake. I'll show you who's scared, kid. The crack of another gun echoed, but it was no longer the gunshots that struck fear into my heart, it was the sudden realization that I had put myself between Caleb and Jonah. My own instinct to protect him surged, overriding all sense almost like love itself. No. I screamed as I shoved forward, but the adrenaline swirling around us made everything feel slow and surreal. My body collided with Caleb's, and in that single moment, our fates intertwined. "Get down!" the officer shouted, but my world morphed into chaos as my feet slid on the slick pavement. And then, like the chilling inevitability of an oncoming storm, there was a sudden flash of movement. I could hardly grasp what happened in the onslaught. Jonah's arm lifted, the gun aimed with icy precision, but just before the world turned dark a loud crack split the air, different from the gun-shattering glass. I felt the world spin, air expelled from my lungs as an unseen force wrenched at my heart, pulling us downward into the murky brinks of an unknown fate. I landed hard against the pavement, jolting the breath from my body, but as I struggled to process the chaos, my gaze locked onto Caleb. "Are you okay?" I managed to gasp, visions of him marred by flashes of darkness threatening to overtake me. Then, the flicker of something caught my eye, a shimmer of metal on the pavement. And just as my thoughts began unraveling, a figure emerged through a haze of confusion. "Tie them up." Jonah's voice sliced through the confusion, bitterness dripping from every word. I couldn't comprehend what was happening. Another voice rang out, but muddied through bleary confusion, before a faint realization struck. The Officara blur of authority was now pinned against the wall by several shadowed men. My heart sank deeper as I tried to climb to my feet, a primal instinct overriding the fear. Suddenly, the glow of a distant siren flickered in the night, pulsing like a heartbeat. The moment of hope, however small, felt like a mirage flickering beyond my grasp. In that fractured instant, a new determination ignited within me. No. I screamed into the dark, overwhelmed by desperation as I fought against the draw of hopelessness settling within my chest. Just when I thought all hope was lost, the ground shook with an unexpected sound, the arrival of sirens growing closer, shattering the night once and for all right before darkness surged again, burying me deep in uncertainty. The dust settled uneasily around us, thick and suffocating, as the dissonance echoed off the walls of the alley. The sirens drew closer, but the shadows around us made the sound seem distant, almost ghost-like. My heart raced as I fought to comprehend the chaos unfolding before menacing figures, the glint of metal, the raw fear that clawed at my throat. "Stay down!" Caleb shouted, his eyes wild with an emotion I couldn't fully grasp. Fear? Anger? Desperation? I began to perceive the thin line that tethered us to each other, the sheer determination not to let go, even in the face of terror. Jonah advanced, his presence dark and oppressive, and I squeezed my eyes shut for a fleeting moment, wishing desperately for everything to change. When I opened them again, I found my vision locked on Caleb's. The uncertainty in his eyes tore at something deep within me, strings of affection mingling with fear. Then the unexpected happened. A beam of light erupted from the corner, accompanied by a voice filled with authority. "Police! Hands in the air!" A figure dressed in a uniform emerged, the badge glinting even under the thick layer of dust. I felt a flicker of hope rise within me, but just as quickly, the tension escalated. "Get back!" Jonah yelled, menacingly tightening his grip around a weapon that felt almost like a talisman of despair. "You don't know who you're messing with." The chaos surged like a tide, threatening to drown us all as the other men hesitated, visibly weighing the odds. "Drop it now!" the officer demanded, his command booming like thunder, but Jonah's gaze hardened, a mask of defiance. Just a slight shift in Jonah's body language sent a current of dread through me. He was poised to strike again. "Caleb!" I cried out, feeling the words resonate in my soul, the raw urgency of the moment unfurling into a desperate plea. My voice reached for him like a lifeline, but he was already moving, reading the threat like a seasoned player in a violent game. The sirens blared, a contrast to the tense silence that filled the space between breaths. Time slipped away, it was almost a cruel joke. I darted forward, my feet suddenly lighter. If there was even a sliver of a chance to save Caleb, I was going to take it. My body responded without thinking, but the ground felt unyielding beneath me. Just as Caleb lunged toward the officer, trying to shield him with his body, the world erupted into chaos once more. A sound like shattering glass reverberated in the air. A nearby storefront exploded from the force of a stray bullet. The blast sent shards of glass spiraling toward us, and I instinctively pushed Caleb back, cradling his head against my shoulder. In that fraction of a second, I felt the hot rush of adrenaline and fear collide in a tumultuous wave. "Run!" Caleb yelled, urgency igniting in his voice like wildfire through dry brush. "We have to get out of here," but my heart sank. We were trapped in a web of sworn chaos, and the siren's wail was burdened with a cruel irony as they drew closer. Once again, hope felt slippery, almost mocking. Jonah seized the moment, spinning towards us with a predatory gaze. "You think you can escape?" He laughed, a warped sound, filled with menace. "You haven't seen the worst of it yet." And then, in an instant, I was struck by a realization: I wasn't alone in this fight. Around the chaotic edge of the alley, different figures began to emerge, faces lit not just with fear but with a resolve that screamed solidarity. The stranger who had earlier risked himself to protect me was back, flanked by others who had glimpsed the reality of our plight. There was strength in the numbers, a glimmering sense of community I had never seen before. I felt fire in my veins, igniting a newfound courage. This fight was not just for Caleb or me, it was for everyone who felt powerless against the darkness. But even in that moment of unexpected solidarity, fear lingered heavily in the air, clinging to my skin like the smell of smoke. As the figures advanced in a defensive formation, Jonah retaliated, a hunt on his twisted smile that made my heart race. With terror, "Stay close!" I shouted to Caleb, my voice barely masking the tremor of uncertainty. The world around us narrowed again, this time into the ferocity of a shared battle, and the raw intensity pushed me forward like a current surging against the tide. Yet, as we moved, a tumult of emotions collided within me. Each step felt like a leap into the unknown, heightened by a chilling realization gutting me from within: there was so much we didn't know, so many shadows still looming outside the light of fleeting hope. But then I saw it, an exit, a small glimmer of salvation just at the end of the alley. "Caleb, there!" I pointed, my heart racing. But just as I looked back at him, another figure emerged, deeper than the others, cloaked in unyielding shadow. My heart sank even further as I recognized the familiar silhouette, another ghost from our past, one we thought we'd lost forever. "Jonah," the shadowy figure spoke, voice low and cold. "I've come to collect." And just like that, the fragile thread of hope began to unravel, revealing the deeper, more terrifying truth beneath it all. My heart pounded as confusion tangled with dread, threatening to swallow me whole. This was only the beginning of a darkness far worse than the struggle we had waged moments ago, and before me lay a treacherous precipice of unknown fear. I remember the weight of despair heavy upon my chest, for shadows had wrapped around our lives, entwining Caleb, me, and the others in a relentless grip. As the figure of Jonah loomed inside the alley, his aura exuding danger, with every word a complicated past intertwined with painful reality, I pictured the edges of our fragile connection fraying. Jonah stared at me, a murky smile creeping across his lips. "You didn't think I would just let him go, did you? Not when there's so much at stake." The rain pelted down, drowning out his chilling words, but a sense of urgency consumed me like smoke, blurring the line of fear and courage. "Let him go!" I shouted, stepping forward, instinct or bravery driving my defiance. "You don't know what you're playing with." His laughter echoed, sharp and cruel, as he pointed toward the others, counting them off like pawns on a board. "There's always a price, and you're standing right where I want you." I felt Caleb shift behind me, the heat of his presence mingling with raw determination, urging me to fight but also to find a way out. "Together, we're stronger," he whispered, a lifeline tethering me to hope. The world felt surreal, distorted by fear and adrenaline as we momentarily stood our ground under the flickering light of the alley. But despair crackled through the air like lightning, exposing the truth hiding beneath the surface. We weren't just fighting for survival, we were battling against the darkness that threatened to pull us into its depths. Suddenly, voices erupted nearby, and chaos erupted as the figures of the officers emerged, a small army fighting against the tide of darkness. "Get back!" The officer from earlier shouted as he sprang into action, creating a barrier of authority against Jonah's antics. The tension in the air morphed into something palpable, electric. Somehow, I could feel Caleb's heart pounding with mine in a symphony of hope and fear that I clung to that rhythm, each beat igniting new energy within me, pushing past the dread pooling in my stomach. "We can't let him take you," I blurted, the conviction guiding me toward Caleb as I took a brave step forward. "We fight together." Without thinking, I reached for his hand, pulling him alongside me, a testament that love can ignite courage in moments of darkness. "Are you crazy?" exclaimed Caleb, surprise breaking through the armor of his determination. "Maybe," I whispered, a tinge of truth to the sarcasm as I squeezed his hand tighter, leaning into the light shimmering on the edge of our reality. I could see something in his eyes, a flicker of hope ignited anew. It was the kind of ember that, if fed properly, could blaze into a wildfire. "Cover me," the officer shouted, and with renewed purpose, we fought against the tide of fear clawing at our heels. Our attempt seemed futile against the looming abyss threatening to swallow us whole, but unity surged through me, overwhelming the darkness. Caleb and I weaved through the chaos, sharing purpose in the face of uncertainty. Others began to vie with us, shocking Jonah with sheer determination and bravery, each face reflecting the myriad of emotions swirling around us, fury and love intertwining, binding our fates tighter than ever before. We became a web, a tapestry of humanity woven together, creating strength to rise above the fear that gripped us. Then came the twist that took my breath away. In all the chaos, an unexpected figure emerged, lining up with the officers, a woman, whose eyes met mine, recognition flickering in her gaze. "Mom!" I gasped, disbelief coursing through my veins as her figure broke through the darkness. With grace and purpose, she stepped forward, her authority undeniable. "You are not taking him," she declared, addressing Jonah with a firm stance. The air seemed to shift, my heart bursting as emotions flooded my senses like a serene tide crashing against a shore where once there was only uncertainty. "Your reign of terror ends here," my mother commanded, the strength of her voice cutting through the noise, turning the tide of fear toward hope. In that broken moment, everything came together, lost years, buried memories, and truth emerged brighter than the darkness shadowing our lives. I realized we had fought against not just Jonah but against the fear of being forgotten, unloved, and lost. Mom redirecting her unwavering love toward Caleb filled the air with renewed strength, empowering me to stand taller as our fears faded into whispers against the cacophony of the storm. And as the chaos erupted, something miraculous happened. Caleb and I exchanged a glance that revealed all we had fought for: love, friendship, redemption, a tapestry of lives intertwined in untold ways. But before our resolution could settle, Jonah's shadows still clung to us, desperate to snuff out the light. As he gritted his teeth in frustration, I knew this battle was far from over. "Why?" he shouted into the storm, venom lacing his words. "You think love can conquer all? You're foolish." His twisted disbelief hung heavy, even as I stepped toward him. "That I may be foolish," I replied, feeling a surge of courage animating my words, "but love isn't a weakness, it binds us together, and you'll never destroy that." Suddenly, we felt it shift, a palpable surge of solidarity granting us strength. The police charged in, their movements slicing through the shadows, creating space for us to reclaim what felt like ours: a chance at love, at life. In the ensuing chaos, Jonah faltered, darkness inching back, retreating in the face of something it could never understand. My breath caught in my throat as the world around us blurred with purpose. Just as Jonah's facade cracked, wave after wave of voices echoed behind me, a chorus of support revealing a truth I had avoided for too long. "Together, we rise," I whispered to Caleb as we pulled our newfound belief around us like armor. And then, as if the universe was responding to our cry of courage, the storm that had raged through the night began to quiet, the shadows receding into the light. Jonah's grip faltered as beams of hope filtered into our reality, uniting our battle with the sense of freedom we had fought for. As the officers swarmed toward Jonah, his face contorted into pure disbelief, as the love we bore remained undaunted. Finally, I could breathe again. That as the last shadows of uncertainty slipped away, tethered tightly with the fraying strings of everything we had fought for, I turned to Caleb, my heart racing with what would come next, a shared journey born from pain transmuted into light. Together, we forged a bond that would carry us beyond the shadows, reaching towards something greater than Ourselves, every heartbeat echoing a promise of brighter days ahead, and in that moment filled with overwhelming warmth, I learned a powerful truth: love is not merely the absence of fear, it is the very essence that pushes us to fight against it, binding us tightly in the face of our darkest fears. Together, we rise, I echoed into the night, holding on to hope as we stepped into the light, marking the beginning of a journey that would change everything.